Welcome back. You're watching the Daily Report with my guest tonight. That is J.M. Waiganjo, Commissioner with the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPOA. Thank you, Bwana Commissioner, for staying with us. Dr. Kamau Wairuri is a policy analyst who was here on Thursday speaking about policing of protests. And he said IPOA made good recommendations on the policing of protests after the anti-IBC protests. Has IPOA been consulted by the National Police Service, NPS, and the government at large on how this policing of protests could be done better?
We hold meetings with the National Police Service and also with their commission, the National Police Service Commission. And we make many recommendations. Our recommendations, normally we submit them to Parliament, the committee that oversees us, the Committee on Security. We also give our recommendations to the Inspector General of Police because he's the one responsible for the daily running of that institution. Unfortunately, some of the recommendations are implemented and others are not because, I mean, it's about budgeting, giving appropriate and proper budget to the National Police Service. And the other thing we have also seen is that we do not remunerate our officers well. The welfare of the members of the National Police Service is wanting. And we have been appealing to the National Police Service Commission to do more on the remuneration of the officers, the working conditions of the officers, the health of the officers, their insurance, a lot of things. So some of the recommendations that we have made is like the one I already told you about, registration, so that we can know, how the protests are handled. But we haven't seen the implementation of that recommendation. We know and we are fully aware of the Presidential Task Force on Police Reforms that the
Maraga-led commission.
Yes. And all our recommendations are in that report. So we are very hopeful and very optimistic that this time, those recommendations that are within that task force will be implemented. Because if they are implemented, I believe the Kenyan police are learned and professional. All we need to do now is to make sure that their welfare is taken care of, even mentally, because you have had incidences where the police maybe shoot their boss or shoot themselves or all those things. So we know there's a problem with the service. We have made appropriate recommendation, and we are looking forward for the proper implementation of the Presidential Task Force on Police Reforms.
Bwana Commissioner, the issue, the bone of contention, especially during the last 1 month, has been Article 37, that is, the right to protest, the right to picket. When you look at even how this has panned out, it is, one, a leaderless formation, as it started, and even in the initial stages, I'm sure you saw that video of that young girl who went and was telling the police officer, "Some reject," that TikTok video that went very viral. And that didn't seem to be a very, awkward situation. And the police were just standing on guard, and the protesters was just doing what they were doing. How difficult is it to ensure, because this is the same police force that says it has intelligence on several factors. At what point does then this intelligence seem to have a break point where they seem not to be aware that there would be quote-unquote infiltration, so that then you're able to map out? And you've seen even, the protesters getting the clubbers and submitting them to the police and saying, this is the goon, this is the person, this is the looter. I mean, at what point does this intelligence seem to have a disconnect?
I think the police need to change their strategy, especially the police commanders, because by and large, the protesters, particularly this instant, they are very peaceful, and it's clear what they are looking for. I do not know myself whether it's a very good thing to be leaderless, because I believe the police can only talk to people who are identifying themselves as the leaders of those protesters, because there has to be a meeting point. As for the intelligence that the police gather to know whether there are routers and goons within the demonstrations, I would just say it's the failure of the police to be up on their game, because you cannot tell me that they are completely ignorant of the fact that there will be infiltration by goons, unless they're the ones doing it. So we know that it's possible to have a peaceful demonstration if the police commanders change their strategy. Because, you know, I mean, if you go out to crowd protesters, they will get violent and we will get fatalities. And you see, I remember one of the instances when the Gen Zs met at Uhuru Park, thousands of them, and there was no incident.
That concert?
Yes. They appeared, they did their concerts, they took their selfies with the officers, and they went home. So my submission is that our officers are actually very professional. But the problem is when, you know, they don't get proper guidance and direction. Because I don't know why a commander would allow an officer under his platoon or her platoon to go to the streets with hoods.
What if, Commissioner, it is not the commander? What if it is someone else?
I mean, I believe the officers act under the chain of command. And that assumption is in the law as well. So I do not want to make speculations.
Because we are operating assuming that the law is being followed, but there are instances, of course, where the law is actually indeed not followed. We've seen those speculations on X, on social media, you know, alleging, and because you raise a very valid concern, why would a police officer do that? Because we saw what they did that Sunday. I covered that concert that day, and it was peaceful. But whenever they seem to be outside a comfort zone for the authorities, it seems to be a problem. Do you think there is a possibility that these orders could be coming from somewhere?
I believe those orders could be coming from the police commanders, because I do not expect, and I have no evidence, that the police can act under anybody else's command.
Okay.
The Inspector General of Police is an independent office, and if the IG indeed allows anybody else to give directions to the police, then he will have broken the law. So I want to proceed from the assumption, and that is what we know, that all the instructions on how to quell the demonstrations, they come from the chain of command of the National Police Service. I don't expect it to come from elsewhere. And where the military, for instance, is deployed, that has to go to Parliament, and it has also to come to the attention of the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, so that even those army officers directly comes now under our oversight. Yes, so the information we have is that we do not expect that anybody can be directing our police officers on what to do. The police have their budget, they're independent. So, I mean, unless you have any evidence to show that anybody else directs the police, I have none. And I believe it is the commanders who direct the officers. And there's also commander responsibility. So that there's commander responsibility and personal responsibility. So if there are illegal orders granted by senior police officers to their juniors, the responsibility is personal. The liability is personal. You cannot say that you acted on an illegal order. You'll be held accountable yourself. And your boss will also be held accountable on his own or her own. Yeah, so for me, I think, I don't think anyone has infiltrated the chain of command of the National Police Service.
Okay. We've seen those in authorities, those in power, the government, as it were, seemingly not condemning either in verbal form or in written form the actions. In fact, there seems to be, a small part in the back to these officers in their conduct. We've not seen that. Do you think that contributes in a way to the exacerbation of this very unruly behavior, especially from the police? Because if people are coming in hoodies and they are, because in an ideal situation, this is the side of the protesters, this is the side of the police officers. If this side has someone in a faceless, as it were, do you think the lack of condemnation, of the lack of calling out of these activities could be contributing to that?
Yeah, I think so. I think we need to see more from the Inspector General of Police, even directing his officers to to deal with the protesters professionally, and to reduce the fatalities.
Yes.
So when there is, such brutality and there is no condemnation, it probably gives encouragement to the officers to proceed with such brutality. So in my view, I think the Inspector General of Police has to be hands-on, has to give proper directions, and has also to give confidence to the public, and also assure the public that they cooperate with the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, and also tell the officers that if they break the law, then IPOA will take up those matters and they will not be protected by the Inspector General of Police. So we would want a scenario where before the protests, we hear the Inspector General of Police directing the public to be peaceful and also asking his officers to be humane and professional. So the moment they are not, such acts are not condemned, I agree, it could be a fuel, it could fuel those who are trigger happy to go on and commit those atrocities they are committing. And
that could be the reason, talking even about trigger happy, the incident you saw with our colleague, the journalist, shot in Nakuru.
Oh yes, oh yes. We have followed that matter. We have taken the statement of your colleague, and we are actually investigating, and that officer could take a plea in the next few days.
In the next few days?
Yes, because she claimed she was targeted, and there seems to be credence in her allegations.
In the era where social media is very open, and there are so many tools that one can use, and to point out ills in the society, do you think that perhaps the police service, as it were, has not conformed and is not up to date with the in what has been going on, the terminology tone deaf? It is not aware that you're dealing with a generation and a population that is very aware of their rights, that knows what is happening. Do you think there is that laxity in appreciating and knowing that if you do not do something, or you do something in a particular way, you'll be called out? And we've seen that their numbers have been shared. They have been quote unquote sent greetings. What do you make of that?
Yeah, of course. I know the police has come a long way. Yes. I cannot say that we haven't moved towards the right direction. But I'm also aware that there are officers who are very brutal and who have refused to move with the times. They are still living on the era of the National Police Force. Yes. And the National Police Force has since turned into the National Police Service. So there is more to be done. There is more in their curriculum to be done. There is more during their recruitment to be done. But like I told you, most of them are very young. The protesters and the demonstrators are basically the same age. So as the protesters are aware, the agencies are aware, they are, they have tools. The police also have tools, and they are also following up on those conversations that are going on online. So I think the solution will come from the leadership of the National Police Service, the leadership of the National Police Service, and the law. You see, where there is no law giving regulations on how to picket, without legal framework, of course you expect people will act outside the law. So the officers know now, and actually we are happy about it ourselves, because most of those things we are investigating, we did not wait for the complaints to come to the office. We moved on our own motion, because we can see them online, we can see what is going on. So it's a good thing. And the service has to grow, with the people, and to be up to date with, with the best practice, international best practices.
What then would you recommend in terms of the outcome of what you've seen? The protests seem to be continuing over time, and they seem not to be dying down. We've seen the activities today. There is what will happen tomorrow. The National Police Service has been issuing statements, ideally, like last week, to quote-unquote block or ban protests from occurring. As IPOA, what do you make of that in terms of even the announcements coming, the pronouncements coming that they will not be allowed here, whereas we have no law that prescribes that? But still, is it within their purview to say demonstrations should not happen?
No. Apparently, the Inspector General has no such powers to ban protesters. And this matter even went to court, and the court quashed, or sort of quashed his direction.
Through the Law Society?
Yes, through the RSK. So what should happen is that there has to be acceptance that picketing is a constitutional prerogative and will always happen. What needs to be done is the change of tactic and the change of strategy. We really need leadership, proper leadership at the top of the National Police Service. And we are hopeful that they could adopt that, because as long as that is not there, then we will continue getting fatalities. I saw a directive today, generally telling the members of the public about protected areas, and why they shouldn't go to those protected areas.
Yes. And
expressed the law as it is. And that's a good thing, because I also want to state that there are places, I have seen Occupy JKI. That's a protected area. And the police has responsibility to protect it. And therefore, if the protesters attempt, for instance, to overrun JKI, I can assure you we will get fatalities. Because the police will use their firearms and quote the law, the instances where they are allowed to use those firearms. So I would want also to appeal to the protesters to just protest within the legal parameters, protest so that that protest can have meaning. But if we hear that they want to occupy certain places, then we do not expect a different reaction from the police. It is predictable how the police will react under such circumstances. But we also want to appeal to the leadership of the National Police Service not to break up the protesters, not to break up the protest. Because by and large, but to concentrate on the goons. It's not difficult to see goons, really, actually. They are different, and you can tell they are different. Even those agencies are arresting them and giving them to the police.
Yes.
So we want to see a more humane police service that gives guidance even to the protesters, even as they also give command to the officers. We have seen officers who are very friendly to the public. And that is what we would want to see happening across the service. But we also want to tell the members of the public not to push the police too hard. Because, first of all, their numbers are not as many. Secondly, their tooling is not up to date. And because protests are supposed to express a view or to demand for a right,
yes,
the Constitution is clear. It's not just to protest, it's to protest and give a petition. So they have an head. And the head tail of the protest is to give a petition. Yeah, to a lawful authority that you want to express your dissatisfaction to. So for tomorrow, I would want the protesters to urge the protesters to keep away from protected areas. Yeah, let us have peaceful protest, because if they go to protected areas, I'm afraid that we may get more fatalities than we have got in the past.
What is the view of IPOA in the Occupy Parliament Day, the activities that occurred in terms of occupying Parliament and getting inside? What are some of the areas that IPOA, you say, okay, legally this is allowed, this is not allowed?
The 25th day of June was not a very good day, particularly because that act also gave several fatalities. We have been investigating, and we have seen some of the youths that overran Parliament. We've seen some deaths. That we have some complaints of some of them are missing. So I would think that went beyond the but the reason why it would go beyond is because we are not having leaders coming out to meet these protesters, because the protesters want to be heard. And they want to be assured that their matters are being looked into, like the way the president did, called them out, X space and try to answer their questions and, meet some of their demands. So those demands have been met, and therefore, I think those that have not been met, the protests should not now go out of their way to, for instance, to go to JKIA or talking about going to State House or even invading police stations. I think that way we'll be moving now to anarchy. Mm-hmm. And that is what we want to avoid. Because on the one hand, we know the protesters are genuine protesters with genuine concerns and genuine grievances. But we also know that there are goons, criminals, rooters, who are now also coming to spoil, not only to spoil for the agencies, but also to steal and destroy property. Mm-hmm. So the police have two roles to play here. On the one hand, they have to protect those properties, because if they don't, then we will investigate them for police inaction. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, they have to guard the protesters, and to escort them. So it's a delicate balancing act.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's doable when both sides, mm-hmm. the leadership of the National Police Service and the direction that the IG needs to give even to protesters. Because, for instance, instead of saying there will not be protests tomorrow, he would be telling the protesters, tomorrow's protest, we expect it to be peaceful, and we expect you to help us arrest those goons, or point out the goons that will be amongst you. Tell your officers not to be, not to shoot, not to use live bullets, but to also act responsibly. That would help.
Do you think that then the way the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, EACC, has called to, or has advocated for prosecutorial powers, is that something that IPOA would be contemplating about, ruminating about, in terms of ensuring that you not only give quote-unquote advisories and reports, so that then you are actually seen to be working and you actually have teeth that can grab and can chew and can actually handle this matter? We have
sought prosecutorial powers.
Yes.
We have even given a version of an amendment to our act, the act that created IPOA. So we have. It would really be very good for us, because then our prosecutions would be quicker, if we got prosecutorial powers. Mm. But now without those powers, then we have to rely on the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions to prosecute for and on our behalf, so making our processes a little longer. Mm. But we have made those recommendations for prosecutorial powers.
Yes. And
we are hopeful maybe Parliament, in its wisdom, may consider making amendments, even in an omnibus legislation.
Yeah. Looking at what you'd like to see moving forward as you enter the home stretch of this conversation, apart from seeing a police service that adheres to its mission, what do you make of, or rather, what would you like to see as IPOA in an ideal situation, whereas indeed your job is to oversight the police? But in what context? What would be the ideal circumstances that IPOA would say, fine, this is 100% okay?
IPOA, apart from investigating the police, also looks after the welfare of the police. Mm. So I think the start point is to look at the welfare of the police, the salaries of the police, the allowances that the police should get should be timely. The recruitment of the police. The recruitment especially is very important, because that is where you get an officer who has a calling, as opposed to an officer who just joined the service because the parents bribed the people recruiting. Mm-hmm. Because we do have officers who actually did not join the service because of the love to serve the country. So if we get the recruitment right, and then we get the welfare of the officers really taken care of properly, mm-hmm. we would have a very proud service. Today, if you look at the National Police Service, the membership of the National Police Service, what you see is a very underpaid officers working under very difficult circumstances.
Yes.
officers who have nothing in their pay slips because they already used their money on loans and stuff like that. And an officer like that will take a bribe. So we want to see the National Police Service Commission coming out clearly to talk about the welfare of the officers, and the government also giving a proper budget to the National Police Service, and retraining and tooling. Those are important things. So we would want to see a National Police Service that cooperates properly with other institutions like the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, to have a symbiotic and a seamless, relationship. Yeah, to weed out the log officers, but to commend and to promote the professional officers.
Yeah. In a minute, because we need to wind up, Andrew Katua on X asks, what happened to the police reforms as initiated by Sir Saitoti, the former minister?
All those reports have been put together and are now under the recent presidential task force, the Maraga report, and we are very hopeful that it will be implemented.
Brilliant. Yeah. Indeed, thank you so much. What a wonderful way to wind up the show tonight. We've been speaking to J.M. Waiganjo, Commissioner with the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, that is IPOA. We also thank you so much for your feedback. As always, stay safe and be kind to one another. I'm George Maringa. Thank you for watching the Daily Report. Thank you so much.
Thank you.